haven't talked about my chickens nearly enough in my videos in the last year up here on the homestead. We've had layers the entire time we've been up here. So 3 years we've had layers, 2.5 years. And just last season, we integrated meat birds. And we move them around with this movable coop here. And then this is our stationary coop, which we do the layers in during the warmer season. So the other 8 months, really. But one thing I do with them that's kind of funny, that has been a neat learning experience and has been showing me things. And this is how I like to learn. I'm just a doer. I just like to do stuff. I kind of throw shit at the wall to see what sticks, so they say. It's what the New World Order does. And so, hey, let's try it. So what I do with my chickens that's been of benefit recently is I don't feed them at a consistent time. I feed them once a day, and they get, during the winter, they get their greens and their grains. So chickens need greens, grains, and grubs. They don't get a lot of grubs in the winter because there's not a lot of foraging to do. Though there is some in the greenhouse, they get some, but not nearly as much as they get when they free run and they move around. So because I don't feed them at the same time every day, sometimes I go, it's 10 a.m. and I'm, oh shit, I forgot to feed the chickens. And it's 7 a.m. as I record this. This would be more around the time that I would typically try to feed them. But what has happened as a result, and it's kind of common sense in a way, but it's an observation worth pointing out. What I've kind of figured out is that when we get back into, like, we're snow melt now. Winter is almost over. This is what it looked like last April, okay? And we're early February. Last April, we're months ahead. Having said that, we still during this period we can dip down and get cold because we're in a mountain and it is winter technically. But this has been a crazy warm winter. And what's happened as a result of the melting we've had is that the chickens are running out. They're coming out. And I leave that greenhouse door open. On cold days, if they just want to be in there anyways, I'll close it. But on temperate days like we've been having, I'll leave it open. And what happens is that the chickens start to come out because they're looking for food. And they will go and start foraging. And so one place that's a really neat observation to show here is this is a garden plot. This terrace has 14 30-inch beds, and they're 18 feet long. And last summer, you can see all the sawdust here, I had the meat birds here. In that coop there was here. I moved that with my skid steer. It was here, and so the meat birds scratched up and grazed a lot of this. But what's so cool right now is the chickens are actually getting some natural greens. In the winter, I would classify my greens as compost. Well, I would classify the compost kitchen scraps we give them as greens, you know? I think it makes sense. So they get greens, but mostly grains in the winter. As far as what they eat overall as a percentage, they're going to get the most amount of grains. And so I ferment my feed for that, which means I get about 3 times the value out of it. That's what I found. And I feed it to them really stinky. Like, you get it really fermented and it starts to rot. And that's actually a good thing. It's all probiotic. So that's really good. You can get your feed stretching longer that way. But the cool thing about this now, also in a gardening context, and this is what I love about all these elements that you add to your homestead, is that they all intersect in some ways, and they should. And hopefully they intersect in as many ways possible. But the chickens are now coming out into this garden plot because it seems familiar. Some of them were coming over here in the summer, but most of the layers and stuff are in here. And that's what I have going right now, is the layers. The meat birds are done. I'll get a new batch in the spring. So they're coming out here now, and they're scratching up this whole area. In fact, I should move these irrigation lines so that it'll encourage them to go in here more, because they're doing me a service now. They're doing what I normally use with my rototiller and fertilizer. And so I don't have to do either of those two things now. So this, and they'll do the whole thing. I mean, look, they're coming in here. They're going over here. Once this snow melts, they're going to tear this whole thing up. So they're going to do my rototilling, and they're going to fertilize it for me. And I have found, because last year I had a couple sections of terraces that we garden that I didn't fertilize, that I just let the chickens go on there for a period of time and left it at that. And I have to say, for, call it medium feeder crops, it worked great. The yields were good. Everything looked great. Having said that, I haven't done things like tomatoes and peppers yet, or corn. Those, or potatoes aren't that heavy a feeder, or squash, say. Those would be heavy feeders that pull a lot from the soil. So I haven't gone so far to try the chickens there. I would imagine in order to be successful there, I would have to leave the chickens on there longer and maybe keep them cooped in that area and throw them feed so they really work it and really manure it, because the manure is the thing. But also the scratching up, what happens is the chickens will scratch the ground, that exposes it. They poop on it, they scratch it around more, they saturate their fertilizer into the soil faster than without the scratching. So it's tilling, it's shallow cultivation, which is super beneficial to the soil. One thing I'll also say about chickens is that when they come in and scratch up, sometimes they also just scratch up the things that they don't want to eat. Oh, my boy's having a little episode here. They'll just scratch up things they don't want to eat, but you still get the benefit of that breaking down on the soil. So that's a good thing. So whether they eat it or not, because people say, oh, don't throw your tomatoes or your pepper plants or old things like that to chickens. And I say, no, actually throw them to them. They'll just scratch them up, and because they don't eat what they don't want to eat. So they'll just scratch it up and break it down into the soil faster than it would break down on itself. So that's a great thing about chickens. They're going to come in, and you can see all this mullein is actually, it's a blessing, but it's my most predominant weed on my soil. Anywhere there's exposed soil, mullein is the first thing that pops up, which is really cool. So it's the pioneer plant here. And they'll come, and they don't eat this, the chickens, but they'll scratch it all up and pull it all up and break it down into the soil. So it's really great. And this rooster is about to go to the block. We're going to harvest him. He's a meat bird that we kept just to see how he would do over winter. And you can see why these birds have a short life, because he's just annoying. He's getting his cock on now, but he doesn't really participate in the crew, because the crew, they're all different species. I did keep one of the female meat birds, that one right there, actually ran into the door, and she seems to be okay. But these guys are they're big and heavy, so he can't even mount the hens because he's too big. And so he's a useless rooster, basically, because he just disrupts. Like he's the beta. The other guy we have called Carrot, he's the alpha. He's the same genetics as all of those hens. He fits in better. He just runs the show. This guy's just an annoying. He's like the guy you didn't invite to your party and showed up, That's who he is. And so we're gonna get rid of him, and I'm gonna actually do it today. So when I go to feed the chickens, which I haven't done yet, I'm going to just take him and put him in this coop. So I'm gonna kind of starve him for 24 hours, and then we'll just get rid of him tomorrow, and we'll harvest them, and we'll take the feathers and the meat and everything. That my wife likes the feathers. I have to tell you, she likes the feathers, and so. Yeah, we'll get a dual purpose out of him. But that's what I wanted to say in this video, folks. Just kind of give you an example of what winter chickens looks like and how it can be a real benefit to the garden. And it's a benefit to the birds. It gets them out, moving around, getting exercise, scratching up the ground, finding grubs. Grains, greens, and grubs is what chickens need. And so they only need 2 of those 3. So that's how you can run them in the winter, and you just have to change their feed a little bit more. And the great thing about them is that in the summer, because I move my birds around, like the layers always get the kitchen scraps and all that, and the meat birds, they get their feed and then they get moved around, and I move them because I'll just use a simple electric fencing. I just move them from terrace to terrace, and so they'll get a varied diet as they break down other crop residues and also move on to new places where there are more grubs, but then also fertilize that place as well. So they're just fantastic overall. Anyways, folks, I'll leave it there for this one. And just a reminder, folks, I'm going to be at Anarchapulco this coming week. The opening ceremony is February 11th. That's Sunday night. And then the event Monday through Friday, the 12th through 16th. I'm going to be there for the whole thing. Doing one talk on the main stage on, I believe, Thursday. And I'm also going to be doing a private workshop on Thursday evening, getting into a lot of the gravy and stuff that we just can't talk about online, if you know what I mean. So we're going to do a private event for that. That'll be ticketed, and there's information about on the website there. But if you haven't signed up for Acapulco already, you can do so and use this discount code for 10%. If you put my name in there, it'll give you 10%, and then it kicks back a little bit to me as well. But in order to come to the private event, you have to be at Acapulco. So that would mean you have to already be attending it. And it will not be online, so it'll just be in person. Anyways, folks, I hope to see some of you there. See you in the next one.